Yeah, man. Got to bring some of those other intros in. I'm pretty sure my audio's good. I got it turned up a little bit. We've been experiencing some glitches. We went 3 hours in Underground on Wednesday and 3 hours on Thursday in Cypher, and we had some audio issues both times, and it had a lot to do with bandwidth. It's the very first of this series. This series used to be called Hats Off before it was introduced to YouTube. It was only on Archaics TV. This is the very first Archaics Live, the Exodus people. Why are they called the Exodus people? Because their history literally begins in a book, the Old Testament, that talks about leaving Egypt. Their inception as a culture begins in being kicked out of Egypt. I know the story is that they were escaping slavery. I know the story that they were escaping a cataclysm, 10 plagues, but the truth remains that there is a pattern here that is endured for thousands of years. The beginning of this culture, they were being chased by Pharaoh and his army. I know the details of the story have been rearranged and changed, but the core fact remains. Exodus from a country into the wilderness is the beginning of this culture. So I call them the Exodus people, and they have lived up to that name. They have lived up to that name to a T, enjoying the Guinness World Record breaking for any culture, creed, religion, society, or group. No one even comes close to the amount of countries that these people have made their exodus from. All right. It's Friday night. Thank you for joining me. Like I said, it's the very first live presentation of the Exodus people. This is the 8th in the series. Let me go ahead and share my screen again so we can get started. This is going to be a high octane presentation. We got a lot of stuff to go. You guys know that through these presentations, I go through Chronicon. If you're really impressed with what you see in this video, because I'm literally going through year by year in my own Chronicon, showing the calendrics, showing also what happened year to year. If Chronicon fascinates you, and it fascinates many people, it still fascinates me, then there will be a link for the download in the pinned comment. But if you go to the description box, you will see links to this entire series. Here's the series. I'm going to show it to you now. This is the Exodus series. This is the Exodus series. Somebody mentioned, where's my blue glasses? I'm just going to tell you, they're right here. And it's really advisable that I wear them. The reason you see blue is because I don't. You see, these lenses are doing exactly what they're supposed to do. They're blocking all the blue light. They're also blocking any type of latent signals that are hidden in it. You have no idea the weapons these people possess. These are awesome glasses. I really should be wearing them, but right now I'm not going to. I'm going to use these. These are not just readers. These are prescription reading glasses. I wear prescription glasses, but the very bottom are readers. These are transitions. I don't like them. It's not big enough reader. I don't even like those glasses. But these right here are just reading glasses, but they're prescription. I had to get these specially made. These are not. These are just general readers, blue blockers to protect. I've got a whole bunch of pairs of these. A bunch. I take real good care of them. Yeah, I don't like LED lights. I got a whole bunch like this light here. That's not LED. That is not LED. That is incandescent. I go to a place called Bulbs and Batteries, and they still sell incandescent bulbs. Everything else is all LEDs. I will not buy the LEDs. This is incandescent. You can kind of tell there's like a yellow glow in here as opposed to a white austere studio glow. Yeah, that's because these are real light bulbs. All right. I should get paid. I should be getting paid to advertise these. Yeah, I would like a sponsor. I'm just so, I would like a sponsor. It would make life easier. But I'm going to tell you now, I'm just so critical of everything out there that I don't want to put my name on anything. The only brand that I have faith in is Archaics. So yeah, it's really hard. It's really hard for me to get a sponsor because almost everything out there is bullshit now. There's still good stuff. There's still good health and wellness stuff. I'm just, you guys know, I don't know anything. I'm not educated on all the health and wellness stuff, so I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do with that. But anyway, let me share my screen. For those new to the channel, this series puts into perspective why the world is the way it is today. It answers this question. We don't need to look at anything going on in the world today to understand why it is the way it is. All we have to do is look at the actual verifiable historical record. The very first video presentation in this series, every one of these are on YouTube now. But the very first one is down at the bottom right here where you see 1 hour and 33 minutes, right here, 1 hour, 33 minutes, 53 seconds. This video here is the prequel. It's not the first video. It's the prequel. You need to see this video first to understand how deep and how far back this really goes. But this is the Roman war against Jewry and the origin of Freemasonry. And by extension, all the fraternal benefit societies, all the secret societies. So it's the Roman war against Jewry. The link is in the description box. That's the prequel to this whole series, showing that what we've been told about why Rome destroyed Jerusalem not once but twice, why it razed Jerusalem down to the ground, salted the fields, took 55,000 Jews and sold them into slavery. You're not told exactly what was going on, but we get the gist when we read Cicero. We understand when we read these little drops put out by Roman orators and authors, as I've shown you guys. History has been scrubbed, but Rome was fed up trying to figure out why all their wealth was being drained from their provinces, and the only common denominator was that the people in charge of finances and money changing and commerce and trade were all Jewish. And they were all involved. And this went all the way up to the fact that they got so bold. Remember, I told you in a previous presentation a couple of weeks ago, I'm not worried about these people. I'm not worried about these people at all because they always overreach. They are their own worst enemies. They always overreach and they always do something stupid. Then it becomes FUBAR and they get kicked out of another country. Happens every time. Well, they did it with Rome. With Rome, they actually seduced Nero. And Nero took a wife named Pompeia. Pompeia was Jewish. There's a lot of intrigues that were going on back then. And then all hell broke loose. It's also the reason why Nero has been so demonized. He's been so demonized. But the real reason is he wasn't persecuting Christians. You've been gaslit. There was no early Christian persecutions. There was no Fox's Book of Martyrs is a lie. It's all a lie. The people being persecuted and thrown into the Colosseums and into the lions' dens were initially Jewish. The Roman war against Jerusalem was intense. They threw their legions at Jerusalem. They were not trying to hear this shit about having their wealth stolen out the provinces. So this is the first video in why Freemasonry and all its satellite adjunct little secret societies was necessary. Yeah, they couldn't just infiltrate Europe. They had to do it very cleverly. So this is video one. It's the prequel. It sets the stage for video for the very first one, which is called the Exodus People. Hats off. It's right here on the top. Then part two is the Exodus people, 65 years of expulsions, plagues, and chaos. Then part 3, the Bohemian War. The Exodus people, the Bohemian War. Part 4 of the Exodus people is Vlad Dracule and the Grand Inquisitor. Oh, Vlad Dracule and Grand Inquisitor Torquemada. Listen, Vlad Dracule is another piece of the puzzle. He was demonized to some stupid vampire Dracula. Yeah, total inversion. He was literally demonized and turned into the very thing that his enemies actually practice and perform. Vlad Dracule was a hero to ancient Transvaal, to Romania. But outside that context, those who own the publishing companies, they're in the entertainment industry, they demonized him and turned him into a stupid vampire type. It's so dumb. The origin of Dracula, but Vlad Dracule was hated by these people. So that's part 4. Let's go on to part 5 now. Part 5 of this series is Europa Rising, the Turks, Jews, and Rome. Exodus. Listen, all these presentations, if you're new to my channel, or if you've been here a long time and never saw this series, I'm telling you now, what you're going to hear in this video is just like all these other videos. Packed full of information, all kinds of tangents that are just super interesting. Don't be surprised this is a 3-hour video. Don't be surprised. Part 6, Papal War against ancient America and the rise of Britain. Although the title doesn't have anything about, the Exodus people, all throughout this video, I'm explaining how they're guiding the narrative, how they keep popping up, stopping things from happening they don't want to happen, misdirections, expulsions from different countries. It's all in this video as well. And the last video, before we get to this one, the 8th, this is the 8th in the series, but the 7th is right here. Romanovs, Rosicrucians, and the New Atlantis. That was the very last one. I think it was 3 or 4 weeks ago I posted that. And this, the 8th video, this is today's video, and it is the very first time I have done Hats Off the Exodus people live on YouTube. Coffee's so good. Hell yeah, Vlad was loved by his people. Everybody throughout the Transvaal loved that dude. And all the outsiders and all his enemies hated him. Hell yeah. I tell the story in there where the Pope tried to intimidate him by sending him 2 cardinals and all their knights and retainers and a contingent of military and stuff. They weren't going to intimidate that dude. Before he even let the cardinals tell him why they had visited his court, he instantly had one of them taken out back through a window. He and the other cardinal were sitting there just talking back and forth, making small talk, when the other cardinal got impaled alive. And as he's listening to his homeboy screaming while that stick's going up his body, and then he turned around and says, "Pray tell, what does the Pope? What word does the Pope have for me?" The cardinal, realizing, holy shit, he's impaling another cardinal alive while he's asking me this. He couldn't answer anything but, "The Pope bids you Godspeed and live long life," and he was allowed to leave. But the original message, he never got to say it because he wasn't going to be the next one. He wasn't going to be the next one. He already knew the Pope had bad intentions. Yeah, so 30,000 merchants. Who are the merchants? Who's the merchant class? 30,000 merchants tried to muscle their way in. Yeah, in the Transvaal, because they wanted to fill a vacuum, because Vlad wasn't going to allow money changers and people to come in there unless they were approved by the state. They had to be vetted. But yeah, there was during times when he was when he was concentrated on the Turks, because he was the Turks feared the shit out of Vlad. Yeah, he employed guerrilla tactics. So often Turks would come into Turgovist, the forest of Turgovist. They would hear screams and all kinds of shit, and they couldn't figure out how people in their own entourage were being kidnapped in silence, taken all the way through the forest without being seen, and impaled before the actual guys in their entourage reached that area. Yeah, it's like he had underground tunnels or something. But people in the back of the van would be abducted in silence, and then they would be run to the front, and they would be impaled, and they would still be alive in agony and screaming when their own Muslim buddies made it to that area of the forest. And they're like, what in the hell is going on? They got the hell out. The Turks left him alone for decades. So it was guerrilla warfare. It was guerrilla warfare, but 30,000 merchants tried to muscle their way in and tried to show Vlad how finances and commerce were supposed to be done and all that shit. Dude was ruthless. He didn't need to do it, but he did it to send a message out to the rest of Europe, to all the other merchant class: stay the F out. He killed every one of them. Yeah, his people killed every one of them. Then eight guys tried to come in again. 8 guys tried to come in again and tell him, what needs to be done in this area, how the trade routes and everything needs. Man, they always getting in people's business. And man, he wasn't trying to hear it, and he told them to leave, and they still wanted to argue. So he had a gigantic iron cauldron specifically made with 8 holes in it. 8 holes in it, and the lid came down. The lid had 8 partitions in it too. He put those 8 merchants in a giant iron pot, lit the bottom, got the fire going in the wood, and all the people came together, and all they could see is these merchants' faces out this iron while their bodies cooked. Yeah. He didn't do it to be cruel. He did it to send messages out to all the courts of Europe. Transvaal area, Transylvania, right here in Romania, is off limits. This is what you can expect when you come through my forest. Now, man, he already knew the histories of these merchant class. He already knew how they had collapsed the economies everywhere, been run out of all these different countries, and he knew that's exactly what they wanted to do to his country. What Vlad did was protect his people. That's all he did. And he's been demonized for it ever since. But this ain't about Vlad. That's that video if you want to go listen to it. I'm just giving you a real short rundown on the Exodus people. It is the Exodus people. Now, because this is some really compelling presentation, all history is. But we ended in 1699. We are now entering 1700, and we're only going to look at 63 years of history. It's just a small window, a 63-year period, but a whole lot happened. It's probably going to take 3 hours to get through this, starting now, really. Well, we'll start and by the time we're done with this presentation, you're going to have some major aha moments about things you probably didn't understand about what's going on in the world today. Who's running shit, how they got there. It's all going to start making sense. You're even going to hear things in this video that's going to put modern personalities that you've come to know, people who are very vocal and loud, and they seem to be pushing this or they seem to be pushing that. This presentation is going to put a lot of stuff into perspective, because you think some of these people that are real popular are saying shit that sounds real good, and you agree with it, but there's an agenda, who these people are and why they want you to go in this direction. It's all here in this presentation. This is 63 years from 1700 to 1763. 1763 begins the Phoenix phenomenon, and I'm going to show you some historic documents that prove the 138-year Phoenix periodicity, because they document it. Remember, I told you a Phoenix year is not like a year that we experience. The Phoenix years start from May to May. A phoenix year is the year before and the year of the phoenix. So when the phoenix phenomenon returns, as I've told you in the past, we're not just looking at 2040. 2040 is the culmination of that tertiary field. It actually starts beginning in May of 2039. Same thing applies to 1763. 1763 begins the Phoenix phenomenon. And you guys already know, I've already showed you everything that happened in 1764. 1764 was amazing for the Phoenix year, but that's only the culmination, the end. You're going to see in this video actual documents from Europe about what happened in 1763. Phoenix phenomenon on its 138-year periodicity was right on time. Gotta love that coffee. Check my chat before we get started. Thank you, Jake Carroll. Always appreciated. I don't always get to enjoy my chat. You guys know I always go through the chat, but it's ordinarily way after the video's over with. Uh-oh, got one for Switzerland. Who's that, Phoenix Priestess? All right. So the best way to do this is to share the screen. A lot of people like to read the same material as I'm going through it. Let's do that. Share my screen. We've had a lot of rain and thunder today. Hope things hold up. I got a generator, so it's really not that big of a deal. Let me move this aside, blow this up for y'all. Oh, there we go. Turn my AC on. I'm starting to get warm. All right. The year is 1700. By this date, the Donme was well entrenched among the Turks and would come to take over Turkey. The Donme sect came into existence following the forced conversion of the self-proclaimed Messiah, Sabbatai Zevi, to Islam in 1666. Now, you should defer to Robert Seifer. Robert Seifer goes off and he gives the whole history. He even wrote a book about this guy Zevi. He's self-proclaimed Jewish Messiah. But it was all fake. It was so stupid because as soon as Muslims put the pressure on him, he converted to Islam to the shock of his community. So he had about 300 families that were loyal to him, and they converted to Islam as well in the wake of his apostasy. Thank you, Stuart. So they were concentrated around Istanbul and Adrianople. So the Donme, get this, pay attention to the details. The Donme is a sect of crypto Jews in the Ottoman Empire. They are the origin of the group called the Young Turks. They would later, in World War I, orchestrate the genocide of millions of Armenian Christians. The Ottoman Empire was infiltrated by crypto Jews who faked their conversion to Islam to infiltrate that mighty empire. They took it over, and among their own ranks, they created a subculture called the Young Turks. The Young Turks are basically their media politicized weapon that they use, but they're pushing Jewish agendas, but they're acting like they're not. They ended up murdering well over 1.5 million Armenian Christians. Yes, they did. They crucified the young women on one big long road, and they made the families walk through to their executions. Yep, they sure did. So the year is 1701. It is 5595 Anno Mundi. Remember, this is archaics. We go by actual verifiable chronology. Easy to verify, as I've done it from so many different vantage points. We do not go by the Jewish year because it's falsified, and we even have citations from rabbis where they're bragging about falsifying the Jewish calendar in order to deceive Christians. So we go by the actual chronology and Anno Mundi dating. It is the year 5595 Annus Mundi, which is equal to 1701 Common Era, the AD calendar. You don't go by the Jewish years. Like today, this year is like 5780 or 90 something in the Jewish calendar. Complete fiction. They made their calendar go back to 3761 BC, which is 135 years off. The reason it is because the Bar Kokhba rebellion is 135 years after the start of the AD calendar. AD 1 is 135 years to 135 AD. 135 AD was the Bar Kokhba rebellion, another false messiah, and the Romans destroyed Jerusalem in that year. That 135-year discrepancy was put in there by the rabbinate because they wanted to confuse Christians because they were tired of Christians claiming that Jesus was the Son of God and the Messiah. They wanted people to believe that Bar Kokhba was. But that didn't work either. That didn't work either because Rome went in there and destroyed all that. So 1701, Yale University is founded. The Masonic Constitution is drafted, telling of those who lived before the Great Flood and discovered geometry, the building craft, and how all their scientific secrets and knowledge was inscribed upon the surfaces of two huge pillars, pyramids in Egypt. Also in 1701, construction began on the oldest Jewish synagogue in all Britain, the Bevis Marks Synagogue. I wonder if Bevis is Jewish. Bevis Marks Synagogue. That would be Beavis and Butthead then. Bevis Marks Synagogue. Bevis has to be Jewish. So the year is 1702, 5596 Anno Mundi. Queen Anne's War, which is the War of the Spanish Succession, occurs, where English colonists battle French and Spanish forces. They're battling over North America. 1703, a killer tsunami struck Awa, Japan, killing over 100,000 to 200,000 people. That's terrible. You can find on YouTube some interesting videos about the Japanese tsunami stones. These are megalithic steels that are raised at the area of tsunamis, and they're dated by year. The Japanese have a tradition because every 40, 50 years a tsunami wipes out a whole bunch of their culture. They have a tradition, and wherever a tsunami reaches at its height, that's where they erect the steel. They erect the steel and they inscribe in Japanese, this is how high the water came in such and such year, and this is estimated how many people died. Here's all the towns and cities that were washed out to sea. Yeah, a lot of Japan's all in the mountains. Well, those mountains have these steels showing how high the water came. It's crazy. I couldn't live there. So on November 26th through 27th, 1703, a bomb cyclone of unprecedented power struck southern England and the English Channel. This storm was so intense that contemporary observers noted strange bird behavior and charged air before it arrived with a mighty roar. So I've read about this, and it's later historians that called it a bomb cyclone because in the historical record, it was a normal day when within minutes, a normal day turned into this badass, huge cyclone, like a hurricane. And so somebody described it as a bomb cyclone. But it destroyed ships, destroyed buildings. It was so unusual. But what I find unusual about it is the references to strange bird behavior and the fact that the air felt like it was charged. We have a lot of people who have been in the thick of earthquakes experience two things. One, it seems like time slows down for them. And two, everything around them feels electrically charged. All right. Friday night got over 1,000 people. That's pretty good. It's pretty good. What? Lacey, you actually made it? I figured you'd be at work. All right. I'm seeing some new names here too. Oh, Fearless Vic changed her profile pic. She's got her eye on somebody. Yeah, man. Abuelo Loco. So 1705 is the year 5599. Anno Mundi. Edmund Halley of England publishes a synopsis of the astronomy of comets, which included data of orbits of comets and the first prediction of the return of a comet, Halley's Comet. That ended up being embarrassing. 1706 is the year 5600. It is exactly 400 years before the end of the calendar in 2106 AD. The illustrious Benjamin Franklin is born, a prodigy of intellectual energy and spirit, a man destined to be one of the most important movers in the American independence movement. I need to say something about this. We have a lot of naysayers, especially in the Tartaria narrative, the Satan's Little Season advocates. I just want you to know, listen, in Archaics, I advocate resets and systemic resets, cycles and epicycles, but you're not going back far enough. Here is a book in my library published in 1794. This book is a chronology that begins in 1588. From 1588, every single year is itemized about what happened in North America among the Iroquois, the 5 nations of the Iroquois, Jamestown, even the lost colony, Roanoke. Everything's in this book. What shocked me is all the founding fathers were still alive when this book was written. Everybody you've heard of, Thomas Paine. Now, Benedict Arnold might not have been, but Thomas Jefferson, George Washington, James Madison, they're all mentioned in here. Their lives, their histories, quotes, what things they've said, how the Continental Congress was using different areas and meeting and stuff. Listen, there's a big movement trying to say that the founding fathers is a myth and that's not really what happened. But I have books in my library from the 1700s that was published mentioning these men when these men were still alive. This was a widely circulated book. I even pulled out a beautiful map. I'm having it put in a glass frame, but there's a beautiful map that was in here. It folds out to about this big, and it shows what was known in North America during the time of Georgia when the 13 colonies, the 13th colony was founded. It shows a map of North America, and it's a blank past the Mississippi. They didn't know what was back that. Well, they didn't know it was in that direction. I got a beautiful map. That map is as old as this book, 1794. So this book is packed full of all kinds of things about what they argued, who should the Constitution protect, who should the Articles of Confederation. But even before that, the 160 something years of colonial history before they even thought about rebelling against the crown. It's all in here. I'm just showing you this book. It's not the only one. I have several books from early America. Do not fall for that BS that the founding fathers were invented. They're bullshit. They're not. No, man. There's letters of marque in here. There's published letters where they're writing each other. You can go look at the congressional records, congressional globes, and congressional records, the globes, and something else, annals of Congress. And they've got the actual behind glass, the actual letters these men used to write each other when they were discussing these things. You didn't have internet back then. Everybody wrote things by hand. I just wanted to show this book because this is just one of many in my library from the colonial period and the post-colonial period when these men were still alive. So you know what? I need to show you the title page. Other people have already seen this book. A lot of people have already seen this book. Roman numerals at the bottom, you'll see 1794. Okay, you can't see nothing like right here. This is original. You can look at the Roman numerals on the bottom. This is a book from 1794. It's a whole account of how America became America. It's literally what we've been taught. They haven't changed it, guys. What they're trying to do is change the Constitution. They can't change the actual history. There's still too many books in circulation from that period of time. There's a Roman numeral at the bottom. This is when it was published, 1794. That's the date. Just wanted to show you guys. Beautiful map in there too. Yeah, so don't fall for it. Don't fall for all these YouTube videos talking about, man, this shit's not real. Yeah, I take a real serious issue with the whole Tartarian narrative, man, because you're literally pushing a narrative that's robbing me of my heritage, it's robbing me of my father's heritage, my grandfather's heritage. Yeah, it's right. Yeah, man. We humans are able to build fantastic things. We just live in a situation. We live in a civilization now where people are literally rewriting history as we live it. Yeah, man, we can build all that shit. I honestly believe that certain cultures are put in this world basically to retard the advancement of all the other cultures, because that sounds racist, but I don't care, because I'm a simulationist and I believe that we're in a controlled environment. And if we were unimpeded, if there was no checks and balances between creators and destroyers, if that didn't exist and we were all creators, do you know how fast we would all come together and figure out that we're in a construct, and that we would put our minds together and we would be just like the Tower of Babel story when the gods were threatened by mankind's architectural project? The Tower of Babel was an architectural project, and this is how the gods responded. Behold, look down, man has become as one of us. And by virtue of his imagination, there will be nothing unattainable for him. This was the admission of those on the outside of the construct looking at us in here. So what did? They divided our languages. When they divided our languages, it literally created division and other things too, because divided languages creates divided culture. And culture is developed by environment. Where you're at it has a lot to do with the type of culture you're going to develop into. So it was excellent. Whether the story is real or imagined, it doesn't even matter. It's a part of our record, the experience, the programming of history contains this story. This story may not be literal, but the story is a veiled threat. It's a literal veiled threat. Come together again, build another architectural monument like the Great Pyramid of Egypt, because we know what it really does. Build another monument like that, and we'll do something worse than divide your languages. So I don't think that the division of tongues and all that was caused by building the Great Pyramid. I believe it's a veiled threat. It serves utility. It's a threat that has utility. My personal belief is that the human types are so fundamentally different that they could never actually just coexist. Not as a cosmopolitan, but divided in their own geographical areas and all that, not coming into a lot of contact with each other, they can thrive. But when you mix them all up, the fundamental differences become very, you can't not notice them. They're not just racial, they're behavioral, they're psychological, they may even be emotional. Hell, they could be spiritual. I don't know. But I know this: there are culture destroyers in our world. That's what this whole series is about. And if those culture destroyers weren't in our world to always set us back every time we achieve a level of happiness, achieve a level of engineering and ingenuity, if they weren't able to set us back, genocide us, and then turn around and rewrite our histories, do you have any idea how fast we would have already figured out that this is an artificial world, an artificial construct, and we got in here somehow, so there must be an egress point as well? We would have done it fast. So I believe everything happens for a reason. And I believe that even though this series is about people who are literally working against the human family, who consider the rest of humanity as dogs and cattle, it's all programming. That's how they're programmed to be. They're programmed to be adversarial and destructive. And that can only mean one thing. It means that we must be more than we suppose ourselves to be. We must be very, very dangerous. We must be very, very powerful. Our imagination, ingenuity, and creativity must be such a threat that every decade that goes by, we are under siege. We are under siege culturally, racially, financially, uh, and there's a vast, well-funded apparatus to be all over the world to really keep us from even understanding what I just told you. Yeah, man. 1706, Benjamin Franklin. So he was born exactly 3,552 years after the birth of Isaac in the year 1847 BC. Isaac is very important to the Jewish people. So 3552 being 1776 plus 1776. I didn't date that. I did not date Isaac's birthday, 1847 BC, to produce these numbers. You can look in Chronicon and see where that source came from. Didn't come from me. You can do it yourself with a calculator to determine that he was born in 1847. It's easy. So this is a major golden proportion number too, 3,552. And it mirrors the common era year of 1776 of the Declaration of the American Independence. So Benjamin Franklin was a patriarch of the United States, just as Isaac was a patriarch over Israel. The United States is actually called New Israel in many historic documents. It is prophetically known as the Empire of Adoption, which marks it as Ephraim in the Old Testament. Ephraim was born in Egypt. Egypt's great seal is the pyramid and the Sphinx. So Ephraim in Hebrew actually means doubly bountiful. And that's exactly what happened with the 13 colonies. They inherited North America, and the rest of Europe was jealous as hell because every mineral, all the land, all the timber, all the natural resources, and empty, almost uninhabited land was all out there for the taking. And it was England that got it, and the rest of the world was very jealous. Very jealous. In this year, French forces entered Spanish Aragon and uncovered the ghastly work of the Spanish Inquisition. Human bodies mangled and abused beyond recognition. They also found a harem belonging to the Inquisitor General, that's Torquemada, where 60 young women were kept for the Inquisitor's pleasure. Now, what's crazy is when you hear Spanish Inquisition, you're always thinking, damn, man, it's crazy that the Spanish would do that to them people. They would do that to themselves. Au contraire. Au contraire. Any really good historian will tell you that the Inquisitor General that during the worst of the Spanish Inquisition was Torquemada. Torquemada was a crypto Jew. He was literally just torturing the shit out of people who wouldn't convert to Catholicism. Yep. So since then, many Roman Catholic nunneries have been discovered to be little more than prisons and dungeons full of hapless sex slave girls and boys for the pleasure of the priests. No surprise there. It's not even a surprise. Even today, it is traditional in a nunnery. The nuns themselves call their bed chambers cells. Isn't that a mind fuck? Even today, nuns call their own bedchambers cells. (1707). This is the year 3113 of the Year of Israel. Year of Israel's Year of Israel's 1407 BC, when Israel conquered Canaan and took the land. 3113 is a cross-calendrical parallel to 3113 BC, which is the start of the Mayan long count, which began the calendar for the 13 clans of the Maya. The Maya are a North American culture. In 1707, England, Scotland, and Wales are united, forming the United Kingdom. This is interesting to me. And I don't know where I put my phone. That sucks. I don't know what I do with my phone. Oh, here it is. 1707. I'm going to look up something real quick. 2027 is next year. 1707. That's 320 years since England, Scotland, and Wales formed the United Kingdom. That's not the date I'm looking for. There's something else about the United Kingdom comes up real strong next year in 2027 in calendrics. You'll hear it in this video, but this isn't it. 320 is not a strong calendric number. But this other number is. It's massive, and it's connected to 2027, England, Scotland, and Wales. So I'll show it to you here in a little while when we get to that year. So volcanic activity on Santorini is recorded in 1707. Off the coast of Wakayama, Japan, listen to this. A luminous object like a white ball appears in the waves of a tsunami. Do you guys remember the video I did last year where I showed a white ghost-like specter came in on a tsunami in Japan, and a guy recorded how the ghost just came out of the water and went up a building, looked around, went into another building, come out the back of the building, went back into the water, a white, like a sheet, a white sheet, but it moved with intelligence. Do you remember that video I showed? That's basically what it's describing here. The Japanese watched a tsunami come in, and inside that tsunami was an orb. I got videos on orbs. Orbs are seen inside volcanoes, tornadoes, hurricanes, lightning storms, and inside tsunamis. Here's another account from the historical record. You can't make this shit up. That's why I love history. All these modern mysteries, they're not so mysterious anymore when we put all the pieces together. (1708) is the year 5602, Anno Mundi. When I say Anno Mundi for new people on my channel, we're talking about the great Adam and Eve cataclysm reset. The story of Adam and Eve is about a systemic reset, and Adam and Eve are the survivors. They're naked. They've lost their entire infrastructure. It was a peaceful, badass, maybe even a technologically advanced world before then. They lost everything. And that's when this calendar began, the Anno Mundi calendar. It began the 1656 years of the pre-flood world. So this is 5,602 years Anno Mundi. William Whiston, pupil of Sir Isaac Newton, published a book explaining that a comet caused Noah's flood, thus enraging Newton. I can see why Newton would be pissed. I can see why he'd be pissed. Newton was trying to get famous for comets and predicting comet returns and all that. And it's one of his pupils that put it together that a comet is what took out, something in the sky caused the Great Flood. And he's right. Not a comet. You already know. It's Mulapin. It's the Phoenix. 1709. This is interesting. This is the year 2484 Olympiad. Greek Olympiad calendar began in 776 BC. 2484 is like the magic number of Aristarchus, who said that the world is destroyed every 2484 years. And it was our discovery in Archaics that this number is divisible by the Phoenix number of 138. It's perfectly divisible by 138. The very first daily newspaper began in London, England. And you wonder why London's today is so effed up. Yeah, man. The very first daily newspaper began in London, England. Newspapers are only designed for population control. Control the mind, control the body. So Bartholomew de Guzmão, Mayo, I don't know how to say that, Guzmão, on August 8th, before witnesses, including King John V of Portugal, raised up in the air in a small skiff of woven reeds suspended from a huge triangular envelope made of cotton and paper. A small fire filled the irregular pyramid with smoke, allowing his craft, the Sparrow, to rise majestically in the air to cover a distance of more than a mile. This was recorded in the Vatican archive as the first successful human flight. 1709, way before the 1903 Wright brothers. But the Catholic Church agents condemned Bartholomew as using the arts of the devil. He fled to Spain and later died impoverished at 38 years old. Go figure. Of course the Pope would. The papacy, the same office we still listen today in the media. So this was the coldest winter in Europe in the last 500 years. It was so severe that birds reportedly froze in midair. And the lagunas, I think that's the canals, the lagunas of Venice and the coast of the Adriatic Sea froze solid, allowing people to walk between islands. That's a quick freeze. If birds were in the air and they froze solid, that means that was a quick froze. They got quick frozen. Ancient city of Herculaneum, flash freeze. Ancient city of Herculaneum accidentally discovered in the digging of a well. Herculaneum was buried under volcanic ash and pumice in 79 AD. This began the excavations where they later also found Pompeii. We move to the year 1710. From 1710 to 1713, in Poland, a prominent trial occurred where Jews were accused of ritual murder. This led to the expulsion of Jews from Sandomierz and the publication of influential anti-Semitic tracts by Stefan Zukowski, who claimed there was a wide-scale Jewish plot against Christians. I wonder where he got that. 1712. The Carolinas are officially divided into North and South Carolina. That's in the year 1712. I figured some of you Carolinians in my chat would find that interesting. But it was 1712 when the Carolinas were divided between North and South, creating two different colonies, 2 of the 13 colonies. 1713, Queen Anne's War ends with the Treaty of Utrecht, with France yielding Nova Scotia. 1714 is the year 5608. The mercury thermometer is invented, paving the way for the regulation of temperature in the development of engines and machines. 1718. This is 1242 from the fall of Rome. Conceptually, it is exactly the same number as 2484 that I showed you earlier, the number of Aristarchus, the time between cataclysmic events. So 1242 is half of that. 1242 is precisely 138 times 9. It's a Phoenix number. Edward Teach from Bristol, England, began a world-famous sea career as a privateer, but ended as a pirate named Blackbeard. Blackbeard took as many as 20 ships from Virginia to the Honduras. He blockades Charleston, South Carolina, with 1 warship and 3 lesser vessels, holding the town for ransom. In his flagship, the Queen Anne's Revenge, he terrorized the seas from the West Indies to the North American coast with his crew of 300 and even bested a British warship. In this year, Blackbeard was killed in a naval battle off the Virginia coast when ambushed by Lieutenant Robert Maynard of the HMS Pearl. I think that's a 60-gun ship, the HMS Pearl, in the Battle of Ocracoke Inlet. So in the Battle of Cape Fear River, a South Carolina colonial force led by William Rhett engaged the gentleman pirate Stede Bonnet. After a grueling 6-hour battle where both ships ran aground, Bonnet was captured and later executed in Charleston. New Orleans is founded by the French in the region later to be known as Louisiana. So, you Cajuns in the chat, 1718 was the founding of New Orleans. If it wasn't for New Orleans, we wouldn't have Zatarained. I haven't eaten that shit in forever. Final expulsion of remaining Jews from Styria, Carinthia, and I can't say these names, man. Carniola. These are Habsburg-controlled Austria. So funny how it's put here. They were expelled for economics. That's how you're going to say it, for economics. I'm pretty sure. Yep. 1719. Get that out of there. William Defoe's Robinson Crusoe is released, an instant success. The English were fascinated with the adventures on remote tropical islands. It is a really good book. It is a classic that I should do a video on it. I really should do a video on Robinson Crusoe. I got to get through book 3 of C.S. Lewis. And then I got to start the Silmarillion, and then from the Silmarillion I got to go into the Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings. I got all kinds of projects on the back burner. 1720 is 1244 fall of Rome, cross calendrical parallel with the 7 against Thebes, the very first military historical event in Greek history. Is 1244 BC. It's called the 7 against Thebes. It's basically a countdown to the 10-year war of Trojan War. So in 1720, the British. Oh, you kill me, man. I wish I would have read that in the chat. Yeah, man. You gave me 138 points for saying that, huh? It was kind of clever putting that word in there like that. Good shit. So the British captured. Oh no, this is Comet Nexel is bright as it passes close to Earth. The ancient charges of Freemasonry are destroyed. Volcanic activity and earthquakes in the Azores. This is 1720. The British captured the infamous pirate Calico Jack and his crew. In the battle, the 2 women, Anne Boney and Mary Read, were the only ones to offer the British resistance. These 2 females were vicious and both illegitimate daughters, Anne being the daughter of a prominent attorney, William Cormac, and Mary was the daughter of a woman in London who gave birth to her after her husband had been away for more than a year at sea. Mary died in prison of fever that year. Calico Jack and his crew were all hanged, but Anne vanished after being imprisoned. Some believe her father's influence had her released, like a little rich girl. I just want to be a pirate. I'm going to hang around some pirates. Yeah, she got to go, spend a couple years on the high seas with these pirates, taking all kinds of merchant vessels and watching the violence and getting drunk, drinking rum, Captain Morgan's rum with the pirates. And when shit hits the fan, Daddy comes and rescues her. In the same year, the pirate leader Bartholomew Roberts, with nothing but a sloop and a crew of 60 men, defeated the combined forces of 1,200 sailors aboard 22 ships lying at anchor in Newfoundland's Trepassey Bay. That's crazy, man. That's just crazy. We got a lot of pirate. This is the high time of the pirates here. That's Bartholomew Roberts. One pirate after another. Calico Jack goes down. Bartholomew Roberts comes up. Calico Jack replaced Edward Teach. Edward Teach was Blackbeard. So this is also 1720. Strahlenberg saw the lower hull of an ancient ship with a keel at Barambinsk in Tartary, where the ocean lies 700 miles away. That's very interesting. But remember, the Pacific is known for its tsunamis. Ask the Japanese. So that ship that was seen 700 miles inland was probably deposited by one of those tsunamis. Although 700 miles is a long way. The death of Rabbi Judah Hakasid in Jerusalem, shortly after arriving with hundreds of followers, paved the way for the Ashkenazi community centered there. This is 1720. We have the first historical account of Ashkenazi Jews from the Ukraine area actually settling in Palestine. 1720. 1722 is the year 5616. The calendrics for this year are off the chart. 5760 divisible by 360, a calendar round, 60 times 60. And then 5760 is divisible by 360. It's divisible by 72, 144, all the chief calendric numbers, 40, 30. It's 5,760 years from the capture of Luna. That is 4039 BC. It is 3,960 years since the Great Flood. 3960 is divisible by the Nemesis X periodicity of 792 years. It is 3168 years after Exodus. This is the Exodus, people. It's 3168 years after Exodus. 3168 is also divisible by 792. Nemesis X number 792. What happens during Nemesis X convergence field events? Exodus. Populations disappear. Pirate Lord Bartholomew Roberts, after an amazing career of 4 years in which he orchestrated the capture of 400 sails, the Welshman from Pembrokeshire found himself captured by English Captain Chaloner Ogle of the 50-cannon HMS Shallow. That's supposed to be Swallow. HMS Swallow. And I said 60 cannons earlier, but that was a guess. It's 50 cannon. This is the same ship that also caught Edward Teach, I believe. Roberts and his crew were drunk, passed out, and at anchor, but Roberts fought to the death. Roberts was killed instantly by grape shot to the throat during the first broadside. So the grape shot cannons aren't the big, they're not the flank cannons. They're not the heavy artillery. You see the doors open up and the big old giant cannon sticks out. That's not grape shot. That's artillery. The grape shot were mounted on the sides, on the bulwark of the ship. Grape shot could be swiveled up and down. It's a small cannon. It's our equivalent to a double barrel shotgun. That's what their grape shot was. So he got hit full in the throat with a shotgun. All right. His death and the capture of 272 of his men is widely considered the end of the golden age of piracy. Yep, that's right. Davy Jones Locker. Dutch Admiral Jacob Roggeveen commanded a fleet of 3 vessels that discovered an inhabited island in the South Pacific on Easter, naming it Easter Island. The Dutch were amazed at the sight of the gigantic artifact faces and heads on the island of which the natives had no memory. It has since been learned that Easter Island was the ceremonial center for an expansive empire of Pacific Island nations that no longer exists now, and that 60% of the island is today beneath sea level. This year was 792 times 5 is 3960 after the flood in 2239 BC. What's interesting about Easter Island is they weren't looking for it. They weren't looking for Easter Island. They were looking for Davis Island. It was the search for Davis Island that led to the discovery of Easter Island. Davis Island, several navigators had reported that an island with a population of about 5,000 people was in that area. And 2 or 3 navigators all wrote about it, visited, provisioned there, got water, stores, interacted with the locals. So that's what Dutch Admiral Jacob Roggeveen was looking for, Davis Island. Davis Island was taken off all the navigation charts and maps because it was confirmed not to be there anymore. The island had sunk. It was gone. They're dead. It's not the first time islands have disappeared, but them and all the population is gone. But in the search, they found Easter Island. All right. We're only on 17. We've only gone from 1700 to 1722. And already, how much have you heard that you've never heard before? Nothing super profound, but it's just really interesting stuff. That's the beauty of history. The historical record is so packed full of gems. We don't need to get on social media and make anything up. The historical record is packed full of awesome shit. So 1723 is the year 5617. A French monk discovered the ancient site of Olympia, Greece, exactly 2,500 years after the start of the Greek Olympiad calendar, 776 BC. Isn't that something? So, Dean Jacques Abadie, a French teacher living in Ireland, wrote, unless the 10, remember this is 1723, unless the 10 tribes of Israel are flown into the air or sunk into the earth, they must be those 10 Gothic tribes that entered Europe in the 5th century, overthrown the Roman Empire and founded the 10 nations in modern Europe. This was a very old belief. This was a very old belief that the Lombards, the Goths, the Ostrogoths, the Visigoths, the Huns, the Heruli, the Saxons, the Jutes, not Jews, the Jutes, the Danes. Anyway, there's 10 principal original Gothic families, and later they spread out and became German north of the Rhine, Nordic, German Franc. You know, the French are Germans. You can't tell the French that today, but the French comes from the Franks, and the ancient Franks were a branch of the German culture. So, yeah, man, this is a very old belief about the 10 tribes being the Celts, the Gauls, the Germans, all the European families. 1725 Common Era. A giant skeleton found in a hidden vault at St. Michael's Mount, Cornwall, UK. Whoops. Workers discovered a low doorway in the south wall of the chapel on St. Michael's Mount, leading to a secret 8 by 6 foot underground cell. Inside was the uncoffined skeleton of a man reportedly 7 foot 8 inches tall, with shin bones larger by 1/2 than any ordinary man. That's not uncommon. We got a whole bunch of historical giants accounts. Giant skeletons found. 1726 is the year 5620. It is exactly 1200 Anno Domini, since the Anno Domini calendar was begun in 526 AD by Exiguus. His last name is Exiguus. Dionysius Exiguus, 526 AD, agent of the papacy. The spirit of revival instilled a powerful Christian movement in the English colonies of North America known as the Great Awakening. Exactly one Jubilee, 50 years before these same Christian colonies would become the United States of America in 1776. This was the 1200th year of the Anno Domini calendar since it began in 526, the year of our Lord timeline. The entire Chronicon timeline covers a period from the start of the Nemesis Cataclysm timeline in 5239 BC, explained in Chronicon, to the year 2106, which is the year 6000 of the curse on mankind begun in 2895. That's the Adam and Eve reset of Genesis. The period being 7,344 years altogether. That's 5239 BC to the 6,000th year, 2106 AD, is 7,344 years. Now, this is 3672 plus 3672 years. That's 7344 divided by 2. A timeline also encoded prominently in the Great Pyramid's chronometry as seen in chronotecture. So half of this period, 3,672 years, is the distance between the birth of Abraham in 1947 BC and the year 1726, right now, the year we're talking about, when some of his descendants experienced the Great Awakening. Remember, America was founded on principles of the Old Testament and the New Testament. This was their core belief. The colonial belief was that they are the lost sheep of the house of Israel, and that they were forming a last days nation in preparation for the return of Jesus. This was the prevailing belief when the colonies were inhabited and when they were heading towards independence from Great Britain. Also, 1947 BC is not a date that I made up. I have showed overwhelming all the source materials that date that. All the rabbis, all the biblical chronologists, all the books where you can see 1947 BC was the date for Abram. So 1947 BC is 3672 years to this year here, 1726. And this in this 3672 years is conceptually the same as 7,344 years. It is exactly half of the whole timeline. In this year, the third edition of Newton's Principia was released. In this year, Jonathan Swift published his Gulliver's Travels, a highly imaginative work of fiction and perfect example of retrocausality, influence from the future. Excuse me. Because Swift wrote about Mars having two unusually shaped moons with unusual orbits. Get that? Let me explain why it's unusual. For those of you who don't know, we're talking about the year 1726, and a man releases a fiction book called Gulliver's Travels, and he describes in this fantasy book that Mars has two moons, and neither one of those moons are round. They're funny shaped, and they have funny orbits around Mars. This man said this in this book. At this date, 1726, all astronomers agreed that Mars had no moons. Mars did not have moons when he wrote this book. So, Swift wrote about Mars having two unusually shaped moons with unusual orbits. Incredibly, though astronomers had studied Mars since the invention of the telescope, over 100 years they've been studying Mars. No moons had ever been seen, not even in 1727, but in 1877. Two irregularly shaped moons with odd orbits were first witnessed by Asaph Hall in 1877, 150 years later. Now, in all the astronomy books, they got two potato-shaped giant asteroids that orbit around Mars, just like he described in 1726. Yeah, man. You don't need to make anything up. History itself is full of mystery. 1727. The Jews in Russia are accused of financial malpractices and expelled from the country by Empress Katerina. Her name is Katarina. Especially from Ukraine. Even back then, a large portion of Ukraine was controlled by Russia because there were Russians living in the Ukrainian frontier. They weren't Ukrainians, they were Russian. Now, 1728 is the year 2040 of the Syrian Greek Seleucid calendar. This is This later became basically a Christian calendar. This is a Western world Greek calendar from Syria, which was Christianized. This is the year 2040 of that ancient calendar. 1728, our calendar. 5622 of the old world's calendar. Astronomer James Bradley discovers that light has speed. This discovery, published 51 years after that of Romer's discovery of the same thing in 1677. Bradley's discovery was published in 1729. There wasn't a whole lot of communication across the world for different discoveries. Sometimes it would take decades before different countries learned what the scientists of other countries had discovered. In this year of 1728, the Persian letter scandal occurred. Published in Mist's Weekly Journal, this piece used an allegory about Persia to suggest that King George II was an illegitimate changeling, leading to a massive political firestorm. This is 1728. Persia at this time is the home of the Jewish exilarchy, as I've told you guys many times. Crypto Jews running the Jewish world, hiding in Persia. They're literally released a satire piece explaining that King George of England is a shapeshifter. WTF. You can't make this shit up. You can't even make this shit up. So it's the Persian, that's Iran, the Persian letter scandal. It's not a scandal. What do they do even today? They tell us the truth and then expect us to disbelieve it. Yeah, man. Some of you guys need to read Chronicon. Some of y'all are holding out. Now, I don't know, a bunch of you have downloaded it. Some of you guys need to read Chronicon. 1730 is the year 3968 after the flood. We got to remember real quick. 3968 divisible by 792. 3968. No. What was 3968? I'll find it real quick. Can't remember what it was. Anybody in the chat real quick? It may not even belong here. Well, I don't know why it's mentioned. Don't know why it's mentioned. I'd have to check it in other dimensions of arithmetic. I'd have to look at it at 1.618 and 3.14 and 5.08. I don't have time to look at it. 3968. It's gonna come back to me later. Wait a minute. 3968, 1940. Is that 1948? Yeah, no, it's 1984. I saw the numbers in my head. I said 1948, but it's 1984 times 2. All right. Anyway, earthquake activity begins and lasts for 5 years. That's a long time for earthquake activity to last. In the Canary Islands, releasing noxious gases that kill much wildlife. A quake at Hokkaido, Japan, kills 137,000 people. Japan's been getting it bad. Japan, tsunamis and earthquakes and volcanoes. Yeah, man. One thing you can say about the Japanese people, you know what, they must get along real well. They must get along with each other real well, because every time the next disaster happens, it's 100,000 people at least that get wiped out, and they're still going strong. They're like rabbits. They must get along really well. Yeah, Japanese people are awesome. Very respectful. Their culture is being torn apart right now by George Soros. George Soros paid to have a whole bunch of non-Japanese moved in there. They're just disrespectful, cutting in line. They're screwing the people over. They're assaulting people in the streets. Same shit's going on in all the Western countries. Sad. Sad, man. All right. Let's see. 1731. From Florence, Italy is witnessed a luminous cloud moving across the sky at a high velocity, accompanied by an earthquake on December 9th. Isn't that interesting? Can you imagine seeing a luminous cloud just moving faster than the wind can take it, and everywhere it goes, it's an earthquake underneath it? Third space, man. You're my hero. Thank you, man. 1732. 1732. I had a good time with Tim. Tim and I went out to eat. Timbo, he came to the Houston meetup. He was even sitting in the studio with me. He was in here with a few people, and he's passing through this area, and we met for lunch. I don't know why I saw somebody's name. I thought it was him, but it's not. Somebody else that appeared in the chat. Yeah. Yeah, we went out to eat, talked for about an hour, almost 2 hours. I do that every once in a while when people are passing through Texas. Bella, go away. Go be a dog for once. She's all breathing underneath my door. 1732. So this is 2484. Again, the number of Aristarchus is divisible by 138. It is a Phoenix number. Aristarchus wrote that the world is destroyed every 2484 years. Very highly specific number. He could have said 25 centuries, but he didn't. He said a number that was specifically divisible by 138. Thank you, Awake Errant. So this is 2484, Year of Rome. Year of Rome is 753 BC. It's also 1776 of the Roman Julian calendar, which began in 45 BC, after 46 BC, which is known historically as the Year of Confusion. This is also 1656 of the Saka calendar. This is a Parthian calendar. Saka calendar started in 76 AD with the passage of the dark satellite. 76 AD, a giant spear was seen in the sky, and it started the Saka calendar. 76 AD happens to also be exact year of the dark satellite on its periodicity of 395.4 years, or 394.5 years. 1656 is the duration of the pre-flood world. It is divisible by 138. The calendrics for this year are off the chart concerning empires. Off the chart. The Saka Empire was huge. Roman Empire was huge. This is the Roman monarchical period going into 1776. This is the beginning of the Roman Empire. This is the Saka Empire of India. 1732. The calendrics are off the chart. This was the final year that England would have only 12 colonies in North America, for in the following year, the 13th colony would be admitted. Georgia. The number of colonies that rebelled against Britain and became the United States of America. The fulfilled prophetic type of the 13 tribes of Israel. The 13th being the tribe of adoption, Manasseh Ephraim of Joseph. Remember, the 13th tribe is the only one born in Egypt. All the other tribes were born in Canaan. The 13th tribe was the cosmopolitan tribe. It is the assimilationist tribe. It is the tribe that welcomes all creeds, all cultures, all people, all bloodlines, and it's a cosmopolitan society. This is why it's referred eschatologically as the tribe of adoption. So Manasseh and Ephraim born in Egypt, not Canaan. This year was 1776 of the Roman Julian calendar. The calendrics are literally identifying the last days empire. There's not going to be another empire after the United States. There's not. Because after the United States, two things are going to happen. One of them is called the Beast Kingdom. The beast kingdom is going to be something very, very different than the Judeo-Christian version promotes. It's not going to be some evil. He's not going to be perceived as evil. That type of society isn't going to be what you think. It's not going to be this Hollywood version of a post-apocalyptic period where everything is nefarious and evil, and it's not. The beast is going to be an angel of light masquerading as the Son of God, and the whole world's going to fall for it, except for a small minority. But the beast kingdom is going to be destroyed by a stone uncut by human hands. That stone is the chief cornerstone, which ushers in the stone kingdom. The stone kingdom lasts 72 years to full systemic reset in 2178. The immortal number that you're all educated on. I don't need to tell you about it no more. But it's also on the 138-year patterning. It's 138 years after 2040, 2178. When all this collapses and we go right back to 3895 BC, Adam and Eve reset. So North America in its association to the number 13 is also historical, because the 13 clans of the Maya occupied North America, and they believed that they lived under the 13 heavens above the 13 hells. And at the end of the 13th Bacton, 1,872,000 turnings of the stars is 13 Bactons. Each Bacton is 144,000 days. The Mayan long count ends in 2046, which is the terminal date for the United States of America, being its 270th year. The United States was granted 90 years plus 90 years plus 90 years. 9 is the number of totality and judgment. 3 is the number of completion. 270 years is the allocated time period for the last days empire that is made of iron mixed with miry clay. This is the eschatology in the Bible. It's pretty, I told you they're playing, but it's a playbook. It's all a playbook. This is what they're going by. The 10 toes of clay mixed with iron are the 10 European cultures that came together, overthrew the Iron Empire of Rome, and then they literally became the 10 kings that are mentioned in the book of Revelation. The 10 kings are going to be overthrown, which is the Western European powers. They're going to be overthrown, not by other countries, not by other races. None of that's in the eschatology. Western, basically white European powers are going to be overcome by the beast. The beast is represented as Apollyon, the destroyer. But to the materialists, to those who are clinging to the materium, the world, Apollo will appear as an angel of light, and he will be worshipped. By those who are awake, they will understand that he is Antichrist. They will understand that he is the destroyer. It's exactly what Revelation calls him. His name is Abaddon, the destroyer. Where did they get Abaddon from for the book of Revelation? They got it from the 7 kings, because that was the name of the dynasty of the 7 Anunnaki kings that were ended in 2239 BC at the Great Flood. We've talked about that in previous. That was the Abad dynasty. In Revelation, it's Abaddon, the destroyer, whose name is also Apollyon. Apollyon is Apollo. So, yeah, people think the United States is about to get destroyed and all. It's not going to happen. It's not nowhere even close. Not even close. It's not even close. So, and when I say United States, I'm also talking about all those other European countries and American, like Canada, also that not so much allied, but we all share the same genetic history. Doesn't matter what the national borders are. So this is really, really intriguing how the 13 colonies fulfilled the role of the 13 clans of the Maya. The United States ends in 2046, which is its 270th year. But on May 28th, over Swabia are seen fiery globes passing through the sky, preceding an earthquake. That just happened in the year before, too. It happened in over Florence, Italy. It happened in 1731. Now look, 1732, it happens over Swabia. 1733, the 13th colony is added to the English colonies in North America, Georgia, founded by debtors and prisoners who were sent from England. The Georgians welcomed all religious refugees, including Jews, but they refused to admit any Catholics. More and more white Europeans were turning their attention to these colonies. The prosperity of the English colonies was the source of much fascination in Europe. Sir Isaac Newton, listen guys, it's in the historical record. There are many old books that talk about whole families in Europe. They would work their ass off for 2, 3, 4, 5 years, and they would put the money aside and they would go to the Dutch and they would tell the Dutch, and they would get a receipt from the Dutch where they would take their sons and daughters and take them to the Dutch with money, give them all the money they can to secure passage to the Americas. Whole entire fleets full of children from Europe were sent to the Americas because it was regarded by many European cultures that there's no hope. There's no good future here in these different European countries. There's just not. But everything's happening in America, and they found new land. Explorers, mountain men were sending reports in. The French love to explore. Frenchmen, mountain men, were going deep into the interior of the United States and coming back with stories of forests the size of countries. Well, all of Europe was afire. They were afire for like 100 years about everything they were hearing about west of the colonies. So with so much land, they knew that the British government couldn't police all that. So what did they do? It's like Manifest Destiny. People by ship would land in the colonies, but they would make their way west of the colonies, and they found all that open land. Whole entire communities started appearing up, villages. They become towns. They become cities. People going west. United States grew faster than any civilization in the history of the world because Europe literally emptied its population, and a lot of those Dutch ships were just full of kids. So, let's see, let's turn attention. Sir Isaac Newton wrote, there is scarce a prophecy in the Old Testament concerning Christ. Yeah, Sir Isaac Newton wrote a badass chronology of the world. He's a chronologist. I have his book called I believe it's called The Chronology of Ancient Kingdoms. I have a copy of Sir Isaac Newton's book in my library. Really good chronology. It's fascinating. And he was a real critic. He was showing that the Egyptians counted a month as a year. He was showing the Egyptian chronologies are not correct. These are not factored correct. Man, tell Graham Hancock that. Go read Sir Isaac Newton. But anyway, Sir Isaac Newton studied the Old Testament. He was really into eschatology and biblical prophecy as well. And he noticed that, man, when it comes to Jesus and the Christ, there's almost nothing in the Old Testament. You have to really twist the meanings, and you have to find significance in passages when the passages by context are really about other things. So he was one of the first ones to really write a lot about that. 1734. Yeah, Nanny Boo Boo. Sir Isaac Newton has an awesome book on world chronology. It's called the Chronology of Ancient Kingdoms, and I have that book. I've cited it a few times. Bouncy, yes. Old books state that America was believed to be the new Israel. You can find this in the 1870s, 1880s, and 1890s during the Great Awakening period, post-Civil War, during the period where the Baptist preachers were just thunder and lightning, traveling from town to town. This is one of their biggest speeches. One of their biggest speeches was how the 13 colonies were the 13 tribes of Israel. It doesn't matter if it's true or not. This is what the people believed. 1734, the Great Awakening. A Christian revival and spirit of nationalism begins sweeping through the 13 colonies, lasting a decade until 1744. Voltaire's letters, called Philosophies, in 1734 are published, also known as Letters on the English. This work praised English religious and political freedom, which was seen as a direct attack on the French absolute monarchy and the Catholic Church. It was banned and publicly burned in Paris, forcing Voltaire to flee the city. Also on July 6, 1734, the Danish-Norwegian missionary Hans Egede recorded a sighting off the coast of Greenland. He described a most terrible creature that rose high out of the water with a head resembling a horse, large flippers, and a body covered in shell-like scales. 1734. 1735. This date marks another Great Awakening revival, this time regional in Massachusetts. The religious freedom of the American colonies was unmatched anywhere else in the world. No religious authority or civil one exercised their will over the Christians of the colonies. Nobody nobody was legislating. They were doing it in Europe. They're especially doing it around the Mediterranean. They were legislating, Christianity, but not in the colonies. 1734. Is the year 3182 after Exodus. Exodus was 1447 BC. Remember, this is the Exodus people. Here's the beauty of it. This is 3182 after Exodus, but Exodus was 1447 BC on the Gregorian calendar, but on the old world calendar of Annus Mundi, the Exodus was 2448 AM. But this year, 1736 is 2448, since the annual change in 713 BC, when the year went from 360 days to 365.25 days. 713 BC, when the year changed to 365 and we had to add 5 epigonal days, that was the year 3182 Annus Mundi. Do you see the cross-calendrical parallels here? I'm going to run this through you again. This is the year 1736 AD, but it's 3,182 years after the Exodus, which was in 1447 BC. But 1447 BC is 2448 Annus Mundi of the old world's calendar since the Adam and Eve Genesis reset. But 2448 years after, before this year of 1736 right here was the year 713 BC, when the sun stood still in the sky and retrograded 10 degrees. And remember, King Hezekiah cried out to the prophet Isaiah, please explain to me how the shadow moved and all this stuff. So this is cross-calendrical parallel, because 713 BC, which is 2448 years earlier from this year of 1736, 713 BC is the year 3182 Anno Mundi. There's 3182 right there. It's the first one on this deal. 3182 years after Exodus is this year, 1736. We have this massive figure 8 cross-calendrical parallel between these dates. And it's not over. 1260 is a major calendrical date I've showed you many times. 1260 right here. Matter of fact, it's also mentioned in the Bible. A 1,260-year period in biblical eschatology is mentioned several times in Daniel and in the book of Revelation. But here is 1260 years since the fall of Rome. So this is a particularly bad, terrible year. Nothing good happened in any of these calendrics. England repeals the witchcraft statutes, which were being used to hunt and murder many innocent people, mostly women. So it didn't stop, but yeah, it still took years for this activity to stop. But yeah, we already know that the women had it bad. It's called the burning times. They had it bad for a long time. Falsely accused, tortured until they confessed. The really attractive females were lightly tortured just to scare them and get their attention. And then they were given contracts like, hey, man, you know, if you just confess to this right here, we have an out for you. If you will dedicate your life to the service of the Roman Catholic Church, and you will do as you're told, well, we will feed and clothe you, and you'll live out your days. You'll be a seamstress. You'll help chamber pots and clean. And believe me, what do you think they did? Allow themselves to be tortured until they broke and then confess to things they didn't do so they could be paraded out to the people and then burned alive at stake? Or do you think they said, okay, yeah, I'll be a nun? Of course they said they'll be a nun. So the nunneries were full of mostly attractive girls and chicks, and nunneries were spread through all the Roman Catholic domains. They're just rape houses. And then you already know the old cliche about the Catholic, you know, the little Catholic altar boys and stuff. It's all true. That shit's all true. So it's the entire Roman Catholic history is just Epstein history. They Epsteined everybody. That's all that was. So this no one knows how many hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of women lost their lives from this. And it's not just losing their lives. Even the ones that didn't want to check out by burning alive, their lives were lost pretty much by just being a nun, because the that's not a life. That's not a life. That's indentured servitude. 1737. An earthquake in Calcutta, India, killed 300,000 people. Over Carpentras, France, it rained soil and dirt from the sky on October 18th. We've seen that many times. Also, 1737 is the date of the Philip Bosch map of Antarctica. It's made in Paris a century before Antarctica was even discovered by the modern world. It was copied from older maps, some surviving from ancient times. It shows Antarctica as two separate land masses, a fact that wasn't even established until 1958, using ice soundings. This map is proof that an ancient mariner race had surveyed Antarctica before the accretion of the ice cap. Now, in Graham Hancock's version, that's going to be the Younger Dryas period, which is ridiculous. In the Archaics version, we're going to go with the fact that 550-year-old maps show Antarctica ice-free as well as Greenland. In Archaics, we're going to go with the Lost Squadron data because you can't refute it. You can't refute the fact that historically documented photographs and historical accounts of the U.S. military losing a squadron of aircraft that during World War II that it had an emergency landing. The whole squadron came together on the ice pack and they all landed, no crashes. They all landed fine, and the ice pack was hard enough to land on, and they were on it. They were on it. 1942. 50 years later, in 1992, a company had to excavate cylindrical shafts 268 feet down into the ice pack to the level where all the planes are. What does that tell you? It tells you that every 50 years, the ice accrual in Greenland is approximately 268 feet. What does that tell you? Calendrically, it means that during the Dark Ages, there was no ice in Antarctica. There was no ice in Greenland. That's what it tells you. So that's the Bosch map. A quake in the Bay of Bengal struck the port of Calcutta. A tidal wave of 40 feet high, destroying crafts and killing about 20,000 people. At the same time, violent tornadoes ravaged the countryside. The final death toll being about 300,000. What are the chances? What are the chances that you can't even hide in the interior on land because violent tornadoes, which are hardly ever seen in that part of the world on land, violent tornadoes are ravaging the countryside, killed hundreds of thousands of people. At the same time, you can't even take to sea because the tsunami is 40 foot high. Ain't nothing will survive that. What are the chances? So crazy. Whoops. So, as you can tell in Chronicon, under each section, when you go down Chronicon, you can see the source materials. Here's the books. And in the back of Chronicon is the full title, author, date of publication, all that. But you can see, I cite where I get all my information. 1738. The Jews of Russia are again expelled after allegations of financial malpractice. After the execution of a court Jew, Joseph Sub Oppenheimer, a financier. 1740. Calendrics are pretty interesting here too. This is 6,048 years since the beginning of the Phoenix phenomenon. That the 6,048 is a golden proportion number. It is divisible by so many numbers, it'd blow your mind. 6,048. It is 2484, the cataclysm number again of Aristarchus. It's also divisible by 138 from the post-exilic chronology. Post-exilic chronology would be 745 BC when the 10 tribes were taken into Assyrian captivity. This is the year 2052 of the Greek-Syrian Seleucid calendar. Telescope maker and astronomer James Short discovered a moon-like object near Venus, passing through the inner solar system. This was not the first time, as seen on Chronicon 2, that a moon-like object had been seen near Venus, and again in 1759, another one will be seen. This is 6,048 years of the Phoenix timeline, or 864 times 7. Archaics veterans, you remember, if you read my book, Anunnaki Homeworld, I got a whole chart on the number 864. It is the number that bridges all ancient calendrical systems. 864. It is the foundation of time number. The British Parliament passes the Plantation Act, allowing Jews in American colonies to become naturalized citizens after 7 years of residence. Increased immigration and establishment of early synagogues in North American colonies. Now, the Plantation Act is a British act. The United States doesn't exist yet. It's still British colonies, but you have to understand who's controlling Parliament. Yeah, well, you got to understand, Parliament is already a captured operation by this time. The Batavia Massacre in 1740, a catastrophic event in which roughly 10,000 ethnic Chinese inhabitants of Batavia, modern-day Jakarta, were slaughtered by Dutch soldiers and citizens of the Dutch East India Company. The acronym for the Dutch East India Company is always VOC. So the violence was sparked by tensions over unemployment in the sugar industry and rumors of mass deportations. In this year also, which is 1740, the Jews are expelled from Little Russia. Little Russia are the regions of Ukraine controlled by Russia, ordered by the Empress Anna. 1741. This is 365 years before the end of the calendar in 2106. Spreading from Massachusetts, now all the American colonies experienced the Great Awakening, a period of tremendous religious growth when church attendance soared and large open-air meetings occurred, preachers traveling from town to town. This was termed New Light Christianity. On September 21st, a strange web-like substance fell on English towns of Bradley, Selborne, and Alresford. 1 inch by 5 inch strands, they fell with some velocity, but they were not spiders' webs. Remember, we have a lot of historical incidences of carbonaceous materials falling from the sky. In this year, Dutch East India Company defeated the Chinese and Javanese forces in the Java War. 1742. For a third time, the Jews are expelled from Russia, again for financial malpractice, this time by Empress Elizabeth Petrova. Even at this early date, Jewish antagonists tried to infiltrate the Christian empire of Russia, and unfortunately, one of the greatest human tragedies to occur would be the Jewish Bolshevik takeover of Russia and their extermination of millions of Christian Russians after 1917. 1743. Count Saint Germain first appeared in London, a man of unknown origin who could speak all of the European languages fluently. He maintained vast social skills, claimed to have lived for centuries by virtue of an elixir of life, even claiming to have been alive when Jesus and Cleopatra lived. Saint Germain astounded European historians with his immense historical knowledge, and Voltaire said that Saint Germain knew everything. That's coming from Voltaire, the critic. Saint Germain claimed that his extraordinary knowledge came by virtue of having studied in the pyramid. Because by erudition it is easy to fool many, by no means is it easy to fool everyone. The person of Saint Germain is indeed a profound mystery, begging the question, was he even human? The reason I've drawn a little attention to Saint Germain is there are historical accounts. There's one that's really profound of an old woman in her 80s who was shocked when Saint Germain walked into her court when she was in her 80s because he looked exactly the way he looked when she was a teenage girl. And she found him, unusual. He's an unusual man. But she's a teenage girl. She's not really paying attention. But she knew who he was. He was famous, been hearing about him for years, all her life. And then in her 80s, she's at court. And he walks in like the day he was, 60-something, 70 years earlier. So very interesting shit. 1744. So this is 2,488 post-exilic chronology, the 745 BC Assyrian captivity, and 1480 of the Coptic calendar. The Jews are expelled from Slovakia. In 1744, the Great Daytime Comet appears terrifying Europe, a comet that filled the sky with 7 tails. In England, there was mass apocalyptic fear that the world was going to end. Astronomers named it Comet de Chasseau. This was 2488 years, or 1244 plus 1244, after the 10 tribes of Israel were deported by Assyria in 745 BC. The Annus Mundi year, 2488, being 1407 BC, when the nation of Israel began at the conquest of Canaan. Jews are also expelled out of Moravia and Bohemia. The Jews are expelled from Prague by Maria Theresa of Austria, who wrote, This is among the nobility. European nobility wrote this. Henceforth, no Jew, no matter under what name, will be allowed to remain here without my written permission. I know of no other troublesome pest within the state than this race. 1746. This is exactly 360 years before the end of the calendar in 2106. Princeton College is founded by Protestants oriented toward religious and moral philosophy. The settlement of Dudleytown, Connecticut was founded in 1747, but quickly gained a reputation for being cursed. It was eventually abandoned following a series of premature deaths and reports of demonic possession. And it remains a site of paranormal interest today. Some of you might want to look that up. Dudleytown, Connecticut. Oh, one of my favorite authors, Dennis Diderot's Pensées Philosophiques, 1746. This work promoted deism and skeptical inquiry into Christianity. It was condemned by the Parliament of Paris to be burned by the public executioner. So they didn't kill Dennis Diderot, they just killed his work. They turned a ceremony, a public execution, but they only burned his book. Dennis Diderot wrote a chronology of the world. And I've cited it to you guys several times. I've showed you pictures, old pictures of it. Dennis Diderot literally said that the Babylonians did not factor hundreds of thousands of years. Berosus made a mistake. He was Greek. He didn't even read. He didn't even understand cuneiform. Dennis Diderot said all this in the 1700s. He said the ancient Babylonians were using a day count system. And when you're given a 485,000 number sum for the Babylonians, it literally reduces to 1,290 something years. Dennis Diderot said that. He also said that Atlantis did not date to 9,000 years before Solon. It was either 900 years or there was a misunderstanding because many ancient Greek chronologists have published that the Egyptians did not understand the Western world's idea of a year because their entire calendar was based off the heliacal rising of Sirius, and they had two periods during our year. They had two flood seasons. Their entire world focused on when the Nile flooded, so their fields could get, so their agricultural life cycle would be fulfilled. They counted 30 days as a year. It was a lunar system incompatible with the way the West factored time. Dennis Diderot said all this years ago, before Jason Brashears of Archaics was ever born. Dennis Diderot already figured out that Graham Hancock was full of shit. Yeah, man. Oh, and Billy Carson. 1748, Common Era. An eclipse of the sun by the moon cast London into darkness. 1749. A storm at the West Azores uncovered a broken cask in the sand that contained a mass of ancient coins. Man, who would love to find some ancient coins on a beach? Imagine this is the year 1749 and somebody found some ancient coins. That's badass. I know what numismatics is, but I don't know how to say that word. Numismatists studied the coins and reported them to be Carthaginian from the 4th and 3rd century BC. That would have been a haul there. On the western coast of Corvo in the West Azores during a storm. Oh, it's the same deal. That shouldn't be repeated. But it was. 1750 CE. Prussian King Frederick II issues the Revidirtes, General Privilegium, it's Latin, strictly limiting the rights and settlement of Jews in his territory. While known for general religious tolerance, Frederick maintained strict social and economic restrictions on Jews, including the revised general privilege of 1750. In his Anti-Machiavel 1740, he critiqued the biblical Moses as a leader who could not have been very skillful because he led the Jewish people down a 40-year path, which they very easily could have completed in 6 weeks. Yeah. It's the dumbest story ever. Have you ever seen the biblical route of the Israelites going to Canaan? Yeah. The land couldn't sustain them 40 years. There's nothing growing out there in that desert. It takes less than 6 weeks to walk that, but they were out there for 40 years. None of it makes sense. Frederick the Great of Prussia wrote, "We have too many Jews in the towns. They are needed on the Polish border, but in the cities they are harmful. They handle all the cash. They are usurers." No, they're Knickers. It doesn't say they are users. It says they are usurers. In his Testament Politique 1752, Frederick, this is King Frederick II, described them as the most dangerous of all sects because they harmed the trade of Christian burghers. Burghers means townspeople. 1751. A particularly damaging forgery of the Book of Jasher is published at Bristol, England. This copy came to the attention of scholars, and they quite correctly labeled it a forgery. The real translation of the Book of Jasher ignored by academics because of the controversy. It is possible that the forgeries, another forgery published in 1829, were designed to scare off the serious researcher, as the Book of Jasher is an amazing and ancient chronology of the old world, a book mentioned twice in the Old Testament. It's also a book that mentions 2 Phoenix phenomenon events. Robert Wood and James Dawkins reached the Syrian desert city in 1751, meticulously measuring and sketching its monumental ruins. Oh, this is Palmyra. Yeah, this is the discovery of Palmyra. Their publication, The Ruins of Palmyra, 1753, allowed for the decipherment of the Palmyrene alphabet shortly after. Palmyra is mentioned in the Bible. It's mentioned in a lot of old writings and traditions. Cape Ann sea serpent. A notable sighting occurred in 1751 at Broad Bay on the Intrepid, part of a series of early colonial reports of large serpentine creatures off the North American coast. The year is 1752. It is 1488 Coptic calendar. On April 15th, over Slavenge, Norway, was seen in the heavens a strange star of octagonal shape, and balls of fire fell from the sky. A streak across the sky seen from Augermanland. From Stavanger in Norway, April 18th, 1752. So we have 2 different sources for this event. An octagonal star. On the 15th of this month, the time having been very beautiful since the sunrise until 2 o'clock in the afternoon, it appeared on the west side of a cloud, which, increasing at a glance, enveloped the entire horizon. At 4 o'clock, arose a hurricane so furious, and one felt such violent tremors of earthquake that all the inhabitants of the city, abandoning their homes that are shaken to the point in the ground, fled into the countryside. That's to get away from falling stones. One strong hail, accompanied by frightful lightning and thunderclaps, brought the height to desolation. Quantity of women and children who were caught in the rains, fearing at all times to be suffocated by a fire from the sky, or submerged by the torrents of water that fell from the mountains with an impetuosity that one cannot describe, make you hear terrible screams. This is all taken off an old woodcut, an old print. Multiple country houses have been swallowed up, and a large part of the cattle was driven by the waters. An astronomical number of deer, rabbits, and other animals were drowned or killed by hail. When the tempest was finished, we saw on the north side a star of octagonal figure, which throughout the following night did not stop throwing a sheaf of fire from every angle. This was exactly 3,600 years, 600 times 6, after the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah and the Indus Valley cities in 1849 BC. What a weird event. The octagonal star of 1752. In this year, Benjamin Franklin proved that lightning is electricity and theorized that it could somehow be harnessed. The famous Liberty Bell was cast in England and delivered to Isaac Norris, who ordered it in Pennsylvania, bearing the inscription from the book of Leviticus 25:10. proclaim liberty throughout all the land unto all the inhabitants thereof. This same year, the bell cracked, and the Colonial American Company, Pass and Stow, recast the bell with less copper and more iron, to be expected from a nation to become an iron empire. In this year, Great Britain finally adopted the Gregorian calendar implemented by Pope Gregory XIII, and decreed that the calendrical system would also be adopted by the 13 colonies of America. Prior to this, we were still using OS, which is old style. This would have been the earlier Julian reckoning. September 2nd thus became September 14th, and all dates prior to the alteration were designated OS, or old style. In this year of 1752, a 9-foot 6-inch tall human skeleton is unearthed at Fulwell Hills, Durham, England. The Bishop of Bergen, Eric Pontoppidan, published The Natural History of Norway in 1752, which provided a scientific description of the Kraken. He described it as an island-sized creature with multiple arms that could drag entire ships down into its whirlpools. 1753. The Liberty Bell is placed in the Philadelphia State House and was used by the Continental Congress. In England, a law was passed to allow for the naturalization of Jews. It was met with a massive public outcry and a conspiratorial panic. Critics claimed that naturalizing Jews was a plot to allow them to buy up all the land in England and eventually take over the government, leading to the bill's repeal in 1754. Where did the English get that idea? Do you remember the 13th century AD under King Edward and what happened? Do you remember who the Normans brought with them and who was basically the principal, the idea for the Doomsday Book? Yeah, the Doomsday Book, the Normans brought Jews over, and then they got the entire land of England was partitioned and all recorded so it could be taxed. They counted how many chickens you had. When the British Parliament attempted to pass a naturalization act for Jews, the public response produced many famous anonymous vitriolic quotes in newspapers like the London Evening Post. This is a direct quote from somebody in England in 1753. If the Jews are naturalized, they will soon become our masters. They will purchase our estates, and we shall become their slaves in our own land. Where did they get these ideas from? 1754. 1754 is the year 3200 after Exodus. George Washington leads the colonial militia in the French and Indian War, which began this year. The 13 colonies allied to the 5 nations of the Iroquois Indians against the French. A war fought between French Canada and the British colonies. The French capture a British fort, and Washington leads 160 militiamen and builds Fort Necessity. The French, with their own Indian allies, sieged the fort with no food or supplies. Torrential rains having dampened their gunpowder. Washington surrendered on July 4th as 2,000 men sieged his small unit. George was a devout colonial loyal to the English and the son of a Christian mystic named Mary Ball. She raised George to believe that fear and cowardice were sins and that courage was faith that God would see him through all trials. Missionaries in South America discovered Phoenician inscriptions on toppled pillars in the Amazon jungle. Jean d'Alembert published his article titled Dimension. You can tell I wrote this a long time ago. Article titled Dimension, where he postulated that time was the 4th dimension. George Washington lost on July 4th. Isn't that something? 1755, the year 1229 Anno Domini. Well, it's since the Anno Domini calendar began in 526. 1229 is the actual date for the fall of Troy. George Washington of the colonial militia advised British General Braddock on the unusual guerrilla tactics employed in North America, explaining that European-type warfare was not conducted in America. The Indians had taught the English colonials about this style of fighting, a method unknown to the Redcoats. General Braddock ignored George Washington and marched 1,000 Redcoats and 300 colonials toward Fort Duquesne. The French were warned of the British advance, obtained help from their Indian allies, and even the aid of an old Indian sharpshooter with an established reputation for having never missed a target. The sharpshooter was employed by the French to kill George Washington, who was feared even more than General Braddock. On July 9th, only miles away from the fort, 300 concealed French and Indian soldiers fired upon and killed or wounded 800 of General Braddock's men. He only had 1,000. While the Redcoats fled in panic, George Washington stood his ground, commanding the 300 colonials who trusted him from past experience, fighting off the ambush. The old Indian shot at Washington and was amazed that he missed, shot again and again, and a fourth time, all missing the towering enemy commander. George Washington was tall. The Indian was spooked because he knew he did not miss those shots. General Braddock died in the ambush, which he deserved that. General Braddock died in the ambush, and years later, after the war, the old Indian visited the camp of George Washington at the Virginia colony, explaining that it was he who had shot him those 4 times for the French. George pulled out the old coat he had worn in that battle and showed the Indian the 4 bullet holes, but told him that not a bullet hit his body. The Indian concluded that George was charmed, fated to never die in battle. This visit was in 1762, 13 years before the Revolutionary War. 1755. A comet preceded the Great Lisbon earthquake. On June 7th, a quake in Persia killed 40,000 people. That's Iran. This was followed in November on All Saints' Day by a transcontinental earthquake that shook the lands and seas from the Baltic to the West Indies. This is a worldwide earthquake. In Canada to Egypt, Algiers, Morocco, throughout northern Africa up to Germany, Holland, Spain, and France. About 10,000 people in Morocco were swallowed by the earth, and the world-famous port of Lisbon, Portugal, was the worst afflicted. An expansive granite quay fractured off and plunged into the sea, drowning 60,000 people who had fled to it thinking it was the safest place. Whole ships in the harbor were pulled undersea as the city trembled and burned. Not a trace of these unfortunate people or ships were ever found. No clothes, no bodies, no driftwood, and the sea floor in the region dropping 600 feet. By 2 p.m., as far as England, the day it was noted that the ocean was unusually restless with high waves. Both England and Scotland were shaken by the mighty quake, causing the people to fast and pray at specially held services. The churches throughout were full of people, being All Saints' Day, and these buildings killed many. About 85% of Lisbon was destroyed, and lost among the ruins were a collection of ancient artifacts of Roman vintage that had been excavated in Peru. At the same time of the earthquake, the warm springs at Teplitz, Bohemia disappeared, but later sprouted forth again. A volcano in Iceland erupted, followed by an uprising, and then subsidence of the water of Loch Lomond in Scotland. Just 2 weeks prior to the earthquakes, many meteorites were seen brightly directly over Lisbon, Portugal. A comet preceded the Great Lisbon earthquake. These are all different sources. A quake struck Mauritania and Morocco. Scientific American 5/16/168 reports that ashes mixed with falling hail fell during the Lisbon earthquake. Mm. 1756. The British engaged in the worldwide 7 Years' War until 1763, fighting on multiple fronts against the French, India, and North America. The Jampol blood libel of 1756, this was an incident. This accusation in Poland was so severe that Jewish communities sent an emissary, Jacob Selig, to Rome. His mission resulted in Pope Benedict XIV confirming earlier papal decrees, like those of Pope Innocent IV, that these accusations were completely false and baseless. Do you understand what's happening here? The Jews have been implicated in doing something bloody, something terrible in Poland, and it's not the first time. It's so bad that they can't even rely on Polish authorities or anything like that. They go ahead and default to their new protectors, because remember, by this time, the papacy is already a captured operation. By this time, the Jews are already in full control of the Vatican now. So they send emissaries to the Vatican and say, hey, man, you got to put a stop to this. The only authority higher than Poland is going to be you. You got to put a stop to this shit. How does the Pope know if they're guilty or not? He doesn't. But the papacy is now funded. It is now a capture operation. So they go ahead and do another papal bull, whatever. Oh no, the Jews are innocent. They're not doing this thing. That's anti-Semitic. Edmund Burke's A Vindication of Natural Society, 1756, published anonymously. This satirical piece criticized organized religion and government, suggesting that natural society was superior to civilized order. I agree. I subscribe to meritocracy. I don't care about nobility. I don't care about the corporatizing of. I just don't care about none of that shit. I'm all about meritocracy. Everybody should be awarded and recognized according to their merits. And in a meritocracy, it bleeds down all the way to the smallest community. The smallest village should have a hierarchy that the village decides who the ruling council needs to be, because those men and women have earned that respect from the people. Yeah, we don't have that type of society today. Today it's all compromised politicians. Yeah, you're never going to get me to believe that any politician that is elected into upper levels of government, there's any good guys up there. No. Before their names even go on those tickets, I promise you they've been compromised. Yeah, that's the world we live in. 1757, British supremacy is established in India after the Battle of Plassey. This was secured by the activity of the British East India Company, founded 157 years earlier in 1600. This is not, don't confuse them. The British East India Company is not the Dutch East India Company. As a matter of fact, the Dutch East India Company started in 1602, and it was the first IPO. It was the very first time in the historical record that a company started taking investors. People, it had stocks. The Dutch East India Company of 1602 started the stock market. It's the first company in the historical record that actually advertised, we're starting an East India Company here for the Dutch, but we want investors. And I think they got like 130 something investors. And that's how they built a whole fleet of ships. They ended up for 200 years, they were a thing, but that was 1602. This is the British East India Company. It's a different organization. Just as nefarious. Just as nefarious. Yes, Jamie Robbins, The Dutch East India Company basically started the New York Stock Exchange. You remember New York City, which is predominantly, it's Jewish controlled. New York City used to be called New Amsterdam. It was purchased from the Manhattan Indians by the Dutch. Yeah, it's basically been a Jewish operation from the beginning. 1758, Britain's new Secretary of State, William Pitt, implemented a policy of total war against the French in India. In India, Africa, the West Indies, and America, as well as on the high seas. He assembled a 50,000 man army to attack the French forts. This is during the 7 Years' War. 1759. With 200 ships, the British land 10,000 troops at the foot of the steep hills of Quebec City in Canada, which fell to the British in the war between England and France. Astronomers report seeing a huge planetary-sized object passing through the inner solar system. They later called it Vulcan. Also, Halley's Comet appeared. It was a bright apparition and it renewed scientific interest in comets. The only known appearances of Halley's Comet were in 1456, 1531, 1607, start of America, 1607, start of the English colony, Jamestown, 1682, 1759, 1835, and 1910, and then 1986. The 1531 appearance may not have been Halley's Comet, as the actual timing calls for 1532 appearance. And indeed, in 1532, a comet was reported. Though astronomers fixed the apparition at 1531, the comet's orbit is 72 degrees inclined to the ecliptic, moving in a retrograde orbit. Like Phoenix and Nemesis X object, this steep incline hints that all three orbit along the ecliptic of a dark star, a sister star that has collapsed but is still gravitationally locked to Sol. In this year, this is why Phoenix and Nemesis show us that there's two planes. There are two planes operating here. In this year, Frederick Lewis Norton surveyed the Giza site in Egypt in his study of the Great Pyramid, noting the abundant seashells and petrified oysters around the monument. At this time, the Sphinx was buried to its neck in sand. So seashells have been found all the way to the base of the Great Pyramid. An earthquake destroys Roman architecture at Baalbek in Lebanon. This is 1759. In May, astronomer Andreas Mayer reported an observation of a planetoid seemingly orbiting Venus. Scientists would later call it Vulcan. The British Museum opened, begun from the donation of Hans Sloane, an English physician and naturalist, having died in 1753, with a library that included more than 50,000 volumes. Jacob Frank, influenced by Sabbatai Zevi, led a sect in Poland that practiced redemption through sin, and are known to be crypto-Jews that converted to Catholicism in mass in 1759, leading to theories that they were a fifth column inside the Roman Church. Sounds like the Young Turks. 1760. Montreal in Canada fell to the British. Mayor Amschel Bauer begins his banking career in Germany and changes his name to Mayor Amschel Rothschild, Red Shield. No figure, real or imagined, since the time of Jesus has ever affected the course of human events more than Mayor Amschel Rothschild. But unlike Christ, this man's legacy would see humanities into the darkest times of human tragedy. The Rothschilds would fund entire nations to make war against one another through extensive international banking loans, both sides of each conflict funded by the same family, the Rothschilds. George III becomes King of England. The establishment of the Board of Deputies of British Jews establishment of the Board of Deputies of British Jews to represent Jewish interests in England. Yeah, England's already captured operation. 1761, French astronomer J.L. Lagrange observed an object appearing to orbit Venus. It is also seen by astronomer Schooten. During the 1761 transit of Venus, this is when Venus passes over the surface of the sun. You watch it with a telescope with a special covering so you don't get blind. You can see a little tiny black dot passing over the sun. It's called the transit of Venus. Russian scientist Mikhail Lomonosov discovered that the planet possessed an atmosphere, observing the refraction of solar rays. This was the actual discovery of the vapor canopy of Venus. Canadian-Dutch conflict of 1760 through 1763. In Ceylon, modern-day Sri Lanka, mounting tensions with the Kingdom of Kandy over the cinnamon monopoly led to open warfare in 1761 with the Dutch East India Company. While the first printed account appeared in 1790, the legend of the Flying Dutchman began circulating among sailors in the late 17th and early 18th centuries. It told of a 17th century Dutch East India Company cargo vessel whose captain swore to round the Cape of Good Hope, even if he had to sail until Judgment Day. Sailors believed sighting the glowing ship was a portent of doom. Tin miners in Tregony, Cornwall, uncovered a stone coffin 11 foot 3 inches long, containing the remains of a giant skeleton estimated at 10 foot tall. Only one 2.5-inch tooth survived. The rest had turned to dust. 1762. Look at the calendrics for this year. This is the year 7000 from the Nemesis Cataclysm in 5239 BC. It's 58 centuries since the capture of Luna, the capture flood, when the moon first appeared. It is exactly 5200, the ancient American calendar round. It's 5200 from the arrival of the Anuna and the Gihon flood that killed 1/3 of the human race in 3439 BC. The appearance of Enoch, Enki, the Watchers, Vulcan, Oannes, all that was 5200 years ago. It is 4600 since the Anunnaki dynasty was established in 2839 BC. Remember, Noah was born in the first year of the oppression of the 7 kings of the Anunnaki. That was 2839 BC. It is exactly the 4000th year since the Great Flood in 2239 BC. In this year of 1762, Catherine the Great of Russia forbids all Jews from living in the country, but many ignored the edict and it was not enforced. A parliament of France ordered the expulsion of all the Jesuits due to their moral character, espionage, and insurgent activities. Astronomers report the appearance of numerous black objects passing between the Earth and the Sun. These are again seen in 763 and 764. This is the 7000th year. I already said that. A planetary object transited between the Earth and the Sun, a black round spot seen by Mr. Staudacher in February. In November, astronomer Lichtenberg witnessed a great round cover 1/12. Saw a great round object cover 1/12 the diameter of the sun. That is massive. It's massive, whatever it is. On August 9th, M. de Rostan of Basel, France, observed a vast spindle-shaped body advance slowly across the shape of the sun. Visible 28 days against the backdrop of the solar orb, it was nebulous around the edges. It was considerable distance away from the sun. It was also observed by M. Crost at Seoul. The Octavius. This is a ship. The Octavius, adrift in 1762. The British trading ship disappeared in 1762 while attempting to find the Northwest Passage. It was reportedly found drifting off of Greenland in 1775, with the entire crew, including the captain, frozen solid. 1763 is the final year of this presentation. The Exodus people, number 9, will start with 1764. But this is 1763, which is the year 5657 Anno Mundi. Astronomers view the passage of asteroids in strewn fields passing between the Earth and the Sun. By this date, 15 to 20% of all Americans in the colonies were African origin. Those free and slave, a larger per capita black population than in relatively modern America. An Indian uprising along the Canadian border known as Pontiac's Rebellion occurred. Pontiac organized the assault on and capture of many forts. The English regrouped and defeated Pontiac's coalition. The Treaty of Paris ends the 7 Years' War, the French and Indian War, between Britain and France, leaving Britain as the most powerful colonial power in the world. France surrendered to Britain all lands east of the Mississippi. On August 19th, a darkness came upon London, England, greater than at the great eclipse of 1748. Voltaire, in Treatise on Toleration, 1763, wrote that the Jews, the most imbecile people on the face of the earth, enemies of all mankind, most obtuse, cruel, absurd, who have long united the most sordid avarice with the most detestable superstition. Listen, all these opinions about these people across social media, these are not new. No one's just making this stuff up. There are centuries and centuries of eyewitness accounts and experience for people like Voltaire to have developed this opinion. Johann David Michaelis was a leading German theologian and Orientalist who argued in the 1750s and 60s that Jews could never be true citizens. Quote, as long as the Jews hope to return to Palestine, they can never possess a truly patriotic spirit for any other country. I've told you guys all many times, they are not like us. They are not assimilationists. They will pretend to be assimilationists to occupy your country, but they will always remain independent of that country. Absolutely. Maria Theresa of Austria, widely considered one of the most anti-Jewish monarchs of her time, she issued an edict expelling the Jews from Prague in 1744. Maria Theresa wrote, I know of no greater plague than this race, which on account of its deceit, usury, and avarice is driving my subjects to beggary. Therefore, as far as possible, the Jews are to be kept away and avoided. There it is. That's 1763, guys. But we got one thing to see, because I promised you I was going to show you documents from 1763. 1763 begins the 138-year Phoenix phenomenon periodicity. So you need to see this. The historical record absolutely confirms Phoenix appears every 138 years, as I tell you guys a lot. So I'm going to show you. Some of you have seen this before, but since this is a chronological presentation, you need to see it again. Sharing my screen. This is what happened in 1763. It says a true and wonderful narrative of two entire particular phenomena which were seen in the sky in Germany. The first has happened near Riga, a seaport town in Livonia, where a multitude of people have seen in the open sky a coffin, fiery rods, 3 deadheads, a serpent, and a pyramid. The second was seen in Kurfürstberg, 4 German miles from the city of Elbing, and 10 German miles from Danzig, where from the 6th till the 7th of May 1763, these phenomena stood for 48 hours with a vehement lightning and thunderclap, which more in particular is to be seen in the following cut. Look at this stuff. These are things that they said they saw in the sky. Now remember, these are just frames of reference. The cannon down here is for the big booms in the sky. But this is frames of reference. Phoenix is every 138 years. It culminates in May of 1764, but it starts in 1763. This is it. Just like we're waiting on the one to start in 2039. All of this, I don't know if I got to read all this. I don't know if I can. Okay. We hear with the greatest astonishment that near Riga and Livonia, okay, I already read all that. Or it's frightful to behold during a time, tempest arose, lightning and thundercaps. I will tell you the significance of all this. There are the forebodings of the Creator which go before the punishment. Christ softens thy heart. Desist from sin. The killing sword of the enemy dare not sooner. It's a bunch of religious stuff. I'd get religious too. I saw that in the sky. The hourglass shows the significance of time. All right. This dude's just pontificating. Christendom. Sleep. I'm trying to catch words. The 6th of May, there was seen and heard, just as the clock struck 2 in the afternoon, the sky with thunder and lightning, which lasted without intermission till late in the night. The heaven opened itself very wide. Hear the marvelous things. 3 angels were seen in the clouds who sung delightful. The sky turned clear again. A fiery sun and rod with a great cannon appeared. The clouds turned as red as fire. The winds did blow. Woe, 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 did the 3 angels cry. Oh, people, leave your pride. You got to understand, these people had some creative license. Oh, this is old, though. A sword was seen in the sky with some stars and crosses. People consider this. People repent. The winds did blow very hard from the evening till the morning. Oh, lovely Christ, what happened is no mystery. Many houses were blown down. Men, women, and children were killed. I don't even get it. I'm sitting there praising Christ. Men, women, and children were killed. Praise Jesus. Likewise was heard in the clouds a clear sound. 3 angels descended from heaven and seated themselves in the burying ground. What I tell you of these frightful tidings is true. From such great wonders in the city did happen. The church door did open itself and the steeples did shake. Ministers and magistrates have seen it themselves and considered it. So an earthquake, fiery things fell from the sky. Weird shapes appeared in the sky, attended by great noises. If this happened all the time, they wouldn't have wrote about it. But it happened during the Phoenix phenomenon period of time. Yep. So great. It's a true and wonderful phenomenon. So these are frames of reference. We don't know exactly what they saw, but it looked like skulls and serpents and swords and hourglasses and crosses and cannons to them. And the sun looked like it. The whole perimeter of the sun formed a veil that was red. That's all Phoenix phenomenon. All right. So this concludes my first live presentation. I went ahead and did a live presentation because I lost the actual Archaics TV video that fills this gap. It's the only video that was missing. I've looked through all my files. I can't find it. So I went ahead and just redid it, and I did some more research, and I found a whole bunch of new stuff to put in there that's not in Chronicon. But as soon as this video is over with, I'm gonna play my outro song. But as soon as this video is over with, I'm gonna put the link to Chronicon in the pinned comment, because I know a lot of people are always interested in checking out Chronicon. The Chronicon download is the full 1,055 page Chronicon and like 400 chronological charts in the download. But anyway, I'm gonna provide that in the pinned comment, because all the Exodus people hats off videos are based out of Chronicon. All this is in Chronicon, most of it. But yeah, isn't it so weird that they just dropped a dime on shapeshifters 300 years ago? Oh my God, so crazy. So the next video, I might post it next week, or I might wait 2 weeks. But the next video in this series has already been recorded. And then it's the last one. It starts in 1764, and it's 1764, and it goes to 1815, I think, Napoleon. I think. Well, whatever. That's when I'm going to do all live videos to continue this series, because we got to go through the 1800s. We got to go through the Civil War. I got to tell you what really happened. We got to go through all the Civil War. We got to go through the Prussian European wars of the 1870s, 1880s. We got to move into 1902. Got to tell you all the juicy about 1902 and the assassination of William McKinley in 1901. And then we got to go into the Bolsheviks, World War I, the time between World War I and World War II. We got to do World War II. Oh yeah, World War II is going to get deep. We're going to go World War II, then we're going to go into the Korean War, and afterward, United Nations era. We're going to go into the 1950s, 1960s, 1970s, 80s. We're going all the way up to modern times with the Exodus people. So you can see through the lens of history why the world is the way it is today. That's my presentation, guys. That's it. I did it. Yeah, man. Anyway. Love you guys, but it's time for some time loop tango.
The clock is melting slow. Where does it end? Where does it go? The future's past, the past is near. Everywhere and nowhere here. Look forward to the past. Spin the seconds, make them last. Round and round, no straight line. Time's a loop and it's divine. Yesterday's tomorrow calls my name. History's a great cheap arcade game. Catastrophes and neon lights dancing through the endless nights. We're stuck, we're free. It's all debris of what will be. Look forward to the past. Spin the seconds, make them last. Round and round, no straight line. Time's a loop and it's divine. Cataclysm cool, we ride the waves. Crown of chaos, but we misbehave. Tick, tick, tock, let's twist and shout.